evening. Good evening to our viewing audience. Welcome to another episode of the New Black Leadership Coalition on Intellectual Radio. I am Minister Michael Muhammad, the founder of the New Black Leadership Coalition. I'm sitting in tonight for our usual host, Brother Gregory Sane, who got delayed at Chicago's Midway Airport and is unable us this evening. But the show, as they say, the show must go on. And so we're very pleased to be with you tonight on behalf of the New Black Leadership Coalition and the information, the inspiration, motivation that we try to bring to you each week. We ask if you can share this on social media, those of you joining us via Facebook, and those of you joining us via Instagram. If you can share this broadcast with as many people as you can, we would greatly appreciate it. We promise that you will not waste your time. We will not waste your time, and you will not be wasting anyone else's time by sharing our weekly broadcasts with your social media friends and contacts. We would greatly appreciate it. Tonight, we have a special guest that I'm going to talk about in a second. But in our usual custom, I'm going to make a few comments before we get into our dialogue with tonight's guest. I want to talk a little bit from the perspective of the New Black Leadership Coalition and what its mission and vision and aspirations are. And as the name says, we focus on leadership. We know that during the civil rights movement, scholars say that only about 10 to 12% of people actually participated in the civil rights movement in any regular basis. And so those 10 to 12 or 13% or whatever it actually was, those individuals represent leadership. They represent not just talkers, they represent doers. They represent people who had the courage to not just challenge the contradictions of racism in America, but they actually had the courage to spend their money, to spend their time, to spend their energy, to literally put their lives on the line in many cases, to stand and do that which was very controversial, very dangerous, especially in the aftermath of the Jim Crow South, to get out there in the highways and byways, whether we all agree with all of the strategies of the civil rights movement is another discussion. What I'm trying to do is highlight what leadership is. And so in today's social media era, we have a lot of people who are armchair social media activists. People, we have our own opinions, and we have been provided a platform via Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, etc., to give our opinion about things that we have very little information about. We have very little education about. We have very little involvement about. We do very little to get in the middle and the mix to understand the political dynamic, the unseen realities of what's going on in the Black community. But we all have opinions. And so a lot of us are social media activists. And a lot of us, because we're in a climate of being popular to be social media voices and activists, it plays into the era of the pop-up activists, the activists who is sitting back watching television, watching YouTube, watching social media, and may have a natural feeling about what's going on and decides on your own to jump out there and appoint yourself as the spokesperson, appoint yourself as the leader, appoint yourself as the activist or the organizer, but you have no context, you have no connection to the long continuum, the train of people who have spilled their blood and their tears and their resources and fought white supremacist institutions and lost their jobs, lost their contracts, lost their families, lost so much, who were mentored by somebody before them, and they passed on their mentorship to somebody after them that allowed a chain of discipline and laid some ground rules of what it meant to really speak for poor people, and what are some of the principles and values that you have to exude in your life to be a credible leader for poor people. You can't get that being a social media activist or a pop-up activist. And so the New Black Leadership Coalition, if you take the time to go to our website, which is tnblc.weebly.com, and look at our founders board, which is a snapshot. It's not everybody, but it is a core snapshot of activists and organizers and advocates, all of whom had to go through a mentorship process, a rites of passage process, that received discipline and direction and guidance, and had to learn how to be a good soldier before they could be a good spokesperson, had to learn how to keep their mouth shut and hold their discipline before they got an opportunity to try to lead leadership. And so we want to just say in opening tonight's broadcast that real leadership is about self-sacrifice. And so we talk about the 13 principles of New Black Leadership, and we list self-sacrifice as our 7th principle in those 13. And so if you are a leader or somebody trying to represent Black people, and you put your salary, you put your edification, financial, social, political edification, your personal edification before what is best for poor Black people. And poor Black people have to be the focus, because when you lift the bottom, you lift everybody in between all the way to the top. And that's why Dr. King talked about the Poor People's Campaign. He talked about a war on poverty, not a war on poor people. And so if you are a Black leader and you don't like to talk about poor people, then we have to invalidate you as a credible representative of Black people in this hour. But you have to have a sense of self-sacrifice. And so we need to understand how to assess people that step in front of us and claim to be Black leaders. So leadership is about action, about sacrifice, about pushing the envelope, and not allowing yourself to become like your enemy. And so that's the model of leadership that we're trying to push through this program and through the work that we're trying to do in the New Black Leadership. And finally, I'll just say this. We are a coalition, and a coalition is when a real coalition attempts to bring other leaders and other organizations in the room together, not to engulf those organizations, not to undermine them or pull the rug from under them or stab them in the back in some kind of way, but to bring us together. And that's very difficult, because our sense of self is so frail and so fragile that we as Black people, and I'll say especially as Black men, even though it's really true of Black women also, but it's a little deeper with Black men, we're so insecure that it's difficult to keep us together, because our egos are so fragile, and we're so quick to undermine each other. We're so quick to backstab each other. We're so quick to try to choke the life out of each other simply because somebody may like you more than they like me, or you may get a storyline in a news article and I didn't get one. And now, instead of us working for the good of the community, now my energy is trying to figure out how can I compete with you or how can I knock you out of competition. This is corrupt leadership, and we have to do something to try our best to destroy these tendencies in so-called black leadership from the bottom to the top. So thank you for being patient with my opening commentary. I want to transition now, audience. I hope everybody is all right out there. Again, please share this. Share this. You're going to want to hear what our guest tonight, what's going to come out of his mouth. Tonight, I have the pleasure of having one of my big brothers with me, a man who some of you may know. He is best known now as the host of the long-running show on WBGX Radio, 1570 AM in Chicago, and on the iHeartRadio app. You can pick it up all over the world. And he's also on a few other networks. I'll let him say what those are. Brother Harold Davis. I want to welcome you, Brother Harold Davis, host of the radio show. Thank you for coming in this evening. The last time we had you, we had a few other people. We tried to do the media roundtable, but tonight it's all you. And so those of you who don't know this brother, it's okay. I just said a lot about people who work and came through a rites of passage into trying to lead and speak for black people. And this is one of those brothers that I'm sitting with tonight. He didn't appoint himself. He didn't pop up out of the blue, even though you may not know of him. He has a long, for lack of a better word, pedigree or record, I'll say, of service to black people. Black people not at the top, not even at the middle, but those of us trapped on the bottom who have some aspirations to get up out of the mud and muck and mire at the bottom. He has been a friend of poor black people without a lot of media fanfare, without giving a press conference or press release every other week, even though he's on the radio. Many of us may not know him. So, Brother Harold, I want to start by doing a little quick dig about you and your background. You know, can you tell me a little bit about how you evolved from a young man and when you started to get the urge to get involved, and who were some of the people along the way that kind of grabbed you and helped to, pour into you to prepare you?
Well, as you know, most of us have the same mentors in terms of who we come through and who can validate us and who we studied under, in terms of Steve Coakley, Brother Lou Palmer, Lou Myers, and just to name a few. And when I first came home from school, the first person that I got with was Hal Baskin in Inglewood. And I just stayed with Hal, traveled with him and went into the schools and just hung out at meetings with him, for about 2 years. I didn't say nothing. I just watched. And so, from Hal Baskin and then Steve Coakley, and, it was my car that they shot up the night that they tried to kill Steve on 60th and Cottage Grove. My cousin was driving the car, and you know how Steve was when he spoke at a venue. He would hand you a note and say what time to pick him up. He never verbally said anything on the microphone about what time to get him, or he never even said anything in front of people. So just like that particular night, he handed me a note at Al Sampson's church, and it said 5 o'clock, 60th and Cottage Grove, at his mother's house. So my cousin, took the limo and proceeded. At about 5:15, Steve came down and got in one side of the car. He had his babies with him at the time, but they didn't come down yet. And so he got in one side of the car and put his luggage in, but walked out the other side. So about my cousin said he saw this car coming up, but he said he wasn't paying attention because it was like a circular drive in this senior building. And he said he noticed that it was a black Chevy with no license plates because they had went around a couple of times. He said, and then the third time they came around when they thought Steve was in the car, shot the windows out. And, luckily he didn't get hit, but they shot where they thought Steve was at. Mm-hmm. And so, police came and had me take my car to 71st and Cottage Grove and sat there for a whole week. And then they finally said, come get the car. And that they had done forensics on it, but they don't know who did it. And it was just, just one of those moments in history that, we wasn't reading about it. We were there.
Right.
And so Steve, come to love Steve. And anytime Steve came in town, I was always the one that picked him up. And even up until his death, Steve had been on my show about 3 times in the last 3 weeks prior to him dying. And then this particular Tuesday, he was supposed to come on, and he said he was going to make an announcement that was going to shock the world. And so obviously the announcement wasn't made because on April 11th, Steve passed away, which was symbolic of 411 information. And so, I talked with his ex-wife, and she said that, they had tried to find this information. She gave me most of all his old books. I mean, I met up with her about 6 months ago. She just gave me all these old books, all this writing in it. Steve was doing stuff before the internet was possible.
For those of you who don't know, when he says Steve Coakley, if you don't know who Steve Coakley is, then you need to do your homework. Okay, you really need to do your homework because he's the godfather.
That's right.
In the Black community of exposing the facts and evidence associated with all major government conspiracies to destroy Black people. Steve is the godfather of that intense research-based activism that we have a little bit now, but not really. Right. Except on the Butt Naked radio show. So you need to do your homework if you don't know who Steve Coakley is that he's talking about. And he helped a lot of young people because, you've also helped a lot of brothers from street organizations. In fact, I'm thinking as you were talking about transporting Brother Steve,
right.
You also transported some high profile street leaders on their return home.
Right,
one being Brother Willie Lloyd. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Well, Belly, what happened with that is I had a barbershop on the west side, barber beauty shop on 5935 West Madison. And so the brothers would come in and get their haircut, and I had a wall of knowledge. I put 8-9 pages of stuff up, and they would come read it. And the shop was very popular. Dominique Wilkins would come in. Scottie Pippen would. I had probably the best barber on the west side. I mean, this guy.
Than Adams barber.
Oh yeah. This guy by himself.
All right.
His name was Terrence. He could cut a design in your hair without any stencils. I mean, if you told him you wanted something, he would take them clippers and in his mind, he would look at it and draw it without any stencils, man. Just a talented brother. So he had all these coming through there, he had, like I said, Dominic Wilkins, Scotty, Michael Jordan didn't come, but because he had a bald head, but all those guys that had those texturizers back then, Terrence was the guy. Okay. And so the brothers came one night to see me. They said, man, we need a couple of limousines. And, it never dawned on me who we were going to get, because I had my brother and my cousin driving. And so they said, be at this place at 3:45 in the morning. So, I was just, I'd give the information to them, make sure they be on time. And so I still didn't know anything. Till noon, I was looking at the news and I saw the cars going through into the penitentiary to pick up Willie Lloyd. And so And so I had, like I said, had no idea who we were picking up. Never asked any questions.
Mm-hmm.
They paid for the cars, and that was it. And so then Willie Lloyd stopped by, once he said, "Man, if you ever need anything, let me know. I appreciate you guys." And no, they paid me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't owe me nothing.
Right.
And so anyway, but that was the extent of my, meeting him, or and then somebody put some false stuff out there. I was some vice lord under Willie Lloyd. I think Derek Mosey and them did that. But everybody that know me, I never had any affiliation with anybody. I just knew those guys. Right.
So how did you come to be involved with your work with American?
Well, in terms of that, then that's a story in itself, because my company wasn't American.
Well, I mean, yeah.
My company was Urban Marketing, and
I mean before that.
Oh, before that. Yeah. Well, I had a vending machine service. Had about 5 or 6 young guys working in that. Gave the routes to them once I left it alone. And then I got involved with, training kids how to do carpentry and painting, and only I got involved in that because I was doing stuff at CPS in terms of if there was some issues. Normally, what I did, I would come in and they would give me the auditorium for 2 periods. And if there was some issues, working with Brother Kubla and some other brothers, then what they tried to do with Lafayette Ford, who actually created the stuff for us, he wanted to make sure that anything happened in the streets didn't spill over to the schools. And so that was our job, to make sure that. So, but what I found out was that in trying to use those auditoriums, we couldn't use them because they were all not functional. They were mostly taped off. People had gotten hurt in them. And so I went to our brother, Michael Scott, and said, "Hey, Mike, they got me in these schools and I'm doing these 2 periods with kids, but normally when we get to the auditorium, we can't use them. And we end up going to the gym." And so he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "All of them are raggedy." They had one guy working at 600 schools who was a carpenter who would go from school to school to fix whatever they needed fixed. Just one guy. And so I asked Mike, I said, "Well, Mike, what if I give you a proposal to train young people to fix these auditoriums?" He said, "Well, give me something." So I put something on paper and gave it to him. They gave me, they thought they gave me money to do 12 schools. We did 24. And so that was the beginning of, that. We did that from like 2007 to 2010. Then Huberman and that crew put us out. Then we came back 2014, and we've been, for 4 years we didn't do anything. And so they were paying up the ante, $600,000-$700,000 to tear seats out and put plastic seats in. Well, we was doing the same job for $30,000 with 25 kids. And so, it was a lot of waste going on in terms of, for those 4 years. And whoever was in charge of that waste really should have been in jail, because if we was doing something for $30,000 and now they're doing it for $600,000, and we were hiring young people to do it. And so it just didn't make sense that whoever was making those decisions, it didn't make sense that they was spending that kind of money to put plastic seats in an auditorium where we would restore the seats back to the normal wood and back to the natural wood.
Well, that's a good segue. And the one thing I wanted to get your commentary on was, I know you saw the story, was it yesterday, I think, or the day before? I think it was the Sun-Times is trying to throw mud on
Brittany Gaynor?
No, not her. Faisal with the
with the investigation.
I forget the name of his
his Take Six.
Yeah. So it seems as though there's some forces at work somewhere that has power enough to influence the Sun-Times to try to slow down his organization from exposing the kind of corruption that you're talking, because you're somebody doing something for $30,000,
and then now you
getting $100,000, then somebody doing for a fraction of that.
Right.
Some serious financial corruption going on,
and you got 25 kids working at the same time.
Right. So what do you think?
Well, I think
about how do we deal with the political corruption in Chicago? What are some of the things that we could do as a Black community, especially organizers and activists, to try to hold our leadership accountable?
Well, I think, first of all, when the Sun-Times was purchased by a union, then that right there showed you now that the unions who give money to everybody now was going to be partial as to whoever that they think that they can get rid of in terms of them writing these articles. Like, I think the conflict of interest is, why would the unions be interested in having a local newspaper? Well, to put their stories in it. And so when you can control the media part, I mean, and people put out what they want to put out without any repercussions of whether it's true or not. This guy Faisal, or who, from what I understand, has enough evidence on about 30 some aldermen to put them in jail.
Right.
And so obviously, I'm sure the aldermen didn't want him there and voted him out. But when it comes to us, in terms of Black people, 65% of Black people lost their homes in 2007 to 2010 during the mortgage crisis. 82% of Black males between 18 and 34 college degree or whether back home with their parents. 20% of the deaths in the Black community are between the ages of 24 and 35. My nephew is in that number. Last week, this young rapper they call Santana.
Fredo Santana.
They said he died from drinking that lean.
Liver and kidney failure.
And that's kind of similar to what my nephew had. And so when you look at 20% of the deaths coming from the millennials, coming from between the ages of 24 to 35, that says something in terms of, and I know, Mike, that for the last 6 quarters, the EPI has said that Black men in Illinois are the number one unemployed people in the country. And so we have the highest unemployment rate in the country. That's for a year and a half now. And when you look at Chicago, last year had 58.5 million visitors during the tourists. And 55 million tourists that spent almost $60 billion. And you look at Chicago, last year had 105 cranes. There was $30 billion of construction going on at one time, and Black people were not working. And so 27% of the gross national product in America last year was construction. And when you look at the fact that we're not working, and how do you miss out on 25, a fourth of the money that's being made in this country is coming from construction projects. And not just that, Chicago led the world in new projects and led the world in $30 billion of new projects, 105 cranes.
And we have how many elected officials in City Hall?
18.
We have 18 Black
and 32 in Springfield.
32 in Springfield.
5 or 6 down in the county.
And it was how much the total value?
$30 billion was spent in the city of Chicago with 105 cranes. And there was no Black participation.
Right.
At all.
So this brings up a point that I try to re-emphasize to people. There's a difference between being a good person and a good leader.
That's right.
And we have elected officials many of whom are good people.
Right.
But they're not good leaders.
Not good leaders. No. Even in terms of when you look at under President Obama, there were more billionaires made than during his 8-year period than any other time in history. When you look at Jamie Dimon, the president of J.P. Morgan Chase, they just got a $29 million bonus, wow. but 40,000 employees got less than a 1% raise.
And they close all the ATMs in the Black community at Walgreens.
Exactly. When you look at 75% of American citizens have no money in the bank. 78% of Black people who are dying with $60,000 in debt. And so, and in most cases, GoFundMe has become the insurance companies for us burying people. And so when you look at these numbers and you look at the study that the Washington Post did on the article $1 Million Blocks, where 1,147 blocks in 5 zip codes: North Lawndale, Roseland, Inglewood, West Humboldt Park, and Austin, where they spent $2.5 billion in 4 years locking people up, locking up black men. And between that 4-year period, 75% of the black men between 18 and 54 were given multiple felony convictions. And now, who are never, ever, ever going to enter the workforce. And when you look at the billions of dollars that's made on the prison industry, and you look at the new billionaires that under Obama were created, and you look at all the things that have taken place in terms of the disparities that black people, 65% of them lost their homes. Now they're renting the homes that they used to own. The unemployment rate right here in Illinois. Who made the decision to lock up, to give multiple felony convictions to 75% of the black men in 5 zip codes where we live? I mean, somebody made a decision that said, well, just lock them up. Just give them felony convictions. 75% between 18 and 54 in those 5 zip codes. And then in that same time period, $789 million was spent keeping them locked up in the county jail for 85% of them being nonviolent offenders. But because of these prison industrial complex, that these laws that companies like the GEO Group and Prisons for Profit have spent $30 and $40 million a year lobbying politicians. I had a judge on my show the other day running for judge, and she said, well, first-time offenders, she's a public defender. First-time offenders are between with a gun, 21 to 45 years. I said, so what that mean? She said, well, that's what we go by. Breaking and entering, 6 to 30 years, first-time offenders. And I said, so why would you be talking to me about this kind of stuff, and you're going to become a judge and say you're going to be mandated to do this? And so it's a slate of black lawyers that want to be judges, and they have this slate called Jet something. But on the back of the flyer says bringing law and order back to the community. And I said, well, are you applying for a sheriff's job or a police job? And she claimed that she never knew that the flyer was out. But at the end of the day, man, you got Tommy Brewer down in Markham. You got Leroy Martin down in the county. You got Tim Evans. You got Kim Fox. And we're sitting here while they're locking up our children. The case of Brock Turner, the young Jewish boy who raped a girl in Stanford.
Right.
And Anna Lee raped her, Evangeline raped her, and just did whatever he wanted to do. But that Jewish judge said, I am not going to interrupt his college experience by sending him to jail. So every judge has a discretion in terms of each individual. Well, that Jewish judge said, I'm not sending him to jail. And so what happens to the poor white trash that they called her, that this boy did what he wanted to do? But what happens to us? Even remember the Leonard Clark case? Yes. when Frank, what's his name? What's the boy's name?
The Italian boy?
Yeah, the Italian boy. Frank, what's his name? I can't think of it.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah, but his son, remember?
Right.
They beat Leonard Clark to a pulp. And so they had got it where they had an Italian judge, and that Italian judge sentenced him. And that whole courtroom, they said, you're a disgrace to the Italian community for sending him to jail. Right. I mean, people forgot about that.
Well, yeah, that's why, we talk about the 13 principles of new black leadership, right? The third one is cultural pride. And that speaks to our inferiority complex, that most of us as highly educated people, we're educated from a Eurocentric mind. We are indoctrinated, inculcated, and infected with the white mind. So we use our credentials from white people to gain office over black people, but we have no fight in us, no resistance in us. We don't know how to be power. We know how to be servants. We still have a servant master mentality where we feel obligated to serve white agenda. We don't have black people that go in there and say, you know, we got to re-engineer what's going on here to bring balance and justice back to our community.
Right. No, I agree 100% because once Cornel West writes a book, then it's supposed to be gospel. You know, Tavis Smiley writes a book, it's gospel. But Michael Eric Dyson writes a book, it's gospel. But these guys have taught at these universities of Harvard and Yale and Stanford and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, they don't come with an Afrocentric agenda. They come with a European agenda in terms of once they say it, and once white people are comfortable with them saying it, then we're supposed to be comfortable.
Absolutely.
But at the end of the day, I mean, when you look at these brothers who were given these felony convictions in Chicago during this 4-year period, 75%. I mean, that's like that's a genocidal effect in terms of who's going to repair that. And these brothers are angry. I mean, they're upset. And then you look down the street, you go downtown, and you just see billionaires, and you see all this money, and you say, well, man, I ain't got none.
Yeah, money's everywhere, but mysteriously, it's hard for us to access it.
We don't have it.
We don't have it, right.
And when you look at all these new billionaires and the stock market hitting at a $26,000, 26,000, they said it would never hit 10,000,
right?
The Dow Jones, but it's at 26,000. And so people are making money handle with that 1%. I mean, Bruce Rauner has 14 houses?
Wow.
John McCain has 11 houses. His wife is one of the largest Budweiser distributors in the world. And you look at all this wealth and you seeing this wealth, even when you go downtown, Loop area last year, there were 1,000 new restaurants put up. And then that Fulton district now, they just getting tons of money. I mean, I went over there driving through there one night and got lost and ended up, and I didn't even know all that stuff was over there. And I mean, the little boutique motels are going up.
Lots of restaurants.
I mean, lots 1,000 between
bars.
Between the West Loop and South Loop and Loop area, there are 1,000 new restaurants. So you say, well, who's got the money? I mean, where's the money coming from?
Not to mention the housing, the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000.
Yeah, I mean,
average price of a condo.
No, downtown, $600,000. $600,000, the average condo that they built. They built 5,400 units last year, and they've sold 75% of them already. And it's $1,000 per square foot. And a 600 square foot studio condo that's going up now is going to cost you $600,000. And you say, well, who's got the money? I mean, where's the money coming from?
Well, the money is coming from the fact that people in power know how to create wealth. In other words, they will print more money to keep themselves at a certain standard of living. But so some of the money this is why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and others, but especially the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, in his book, The Fall of America, he over and over predicted that one day the dollar would be worthless because nations would disconnect from the dollar. And by the dollar not being backed by anything, when that day comes, there will be chaos and turmoil, which we see today. The Fed just prints more money when they need more money. They turn on a printing press. They don't match it to any tangible other than the word of white folks.
Nothing.
But I wanted to ask you about black media.
Okay.
Since you are a radio show host, how would can you talk about what the black media's role is in 2017, 2018, to just presently? What role has the so-called black media? Do we have any? And if so, what role have they played in either helping us or hurting us?
Well, I don't think there's much of a black media in terms of what the Defenders now once a week pick.
Correct.
You got the Citizen that Mr. Garfield's dead. I don't know how effective that is. You got Dorothy Lavelle with the Crusader. I'm not sure how effective that is. We got WVON down the street from where I'm at, and
got the final call.
Got the final call.
And Ron Carter printing again.
Right, and I don't know in terms of being free. You know, I mean, just how much can black media do in terms of you know, with these little neighborhood newspapers that we have. But the Defender, I mean, what, Ebony Jett has now been sold. I think now they're talking about selling these 40 million pictures that her daddy had.
Correct.
And the building is gone.
Well, I mean, it was only pictures. Hermine Hartman just published.
Right.
Pictorial.
Right.
Thing.
I had on the show a couple months ago.
Right, I heard that show.
And a real nice book.
So do the what is it called? The National Newspaper Publishers Association.
NABJ.
Yeah.
National Association of Black Journalists.
Thank you. Do they ever invite you to be involved with them at all?
I haven't been invited to anything in terms of from the National Association of Black Journalists. Miss Lavelle was the president of that last year, but I think she's given it up at this point because, you know, but I've never, you know, I always thought it was always a limit that they would go, you know, they weren't going to ever, you know, go as far out there as you might want them to do. But in terms of getting a story, I think the Crusader is the only place that you can get a story. I mean, I don't think the Citizen's going to do it. The Defender, you know, when Roland Martin was there, one of the issues that we had with Roland was we took that pedophile case to him.
Okay.
You know, we took the Catholic Church stuff to him.
Right.
And he wouldn't do a story.
Really?
No, he wouldn't do it. And so
did he just openly refuse, or he just sat on?
He just openly said that he was not going to do a story on the pedophile priest in Chicago.
Wow.
And so we
got a caller.
Okay, all right.
Caller, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Please be quick. We're running out of time. Go ahead with your question or your comment.
I wouldn't if yes, sir. I wouldn't let Harold Davis on. Yeah, can you hear me? I said,
well, caller, we're gonna have to cut you off because you sound like a troublemaker, brother.
What are you gonna say? I'd be real scared.
Yeah, we're not gonna take your call, sir. You sound like a troublemaker.
Hey, Harold.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Harold.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Minister Mike.
Yes, sir.
Look, I wouldn't dare if I was the black national journalist. Ain't nowhere in the world I'm gonna let Harold on my show.
Well, they don't have to let him on their show, but I mean, if we talking about black media, and there's only 2 black talk shows in Chicago in the Chicago area, how could you? I'm sure the folks from the other station are invited. So I'm just curious, why wouldn't they invite the Butt Naked Truth?
Yeah, because they don't want the truth.
That's right. But you were saying
y'all doing a good job, boy.
Thank you.
You landed. You on the ground?
Yeah, I've been listening to the show, man.
Okay.
Hell, I was trying to get
I know you're stranded at the airport.
To relax.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right, G.
All right, Greg.
Okay.
All right. So you were talking about Roland Martin.
Yeah.
Not doing the story.
He refused to do the story on the pedophile priest. And so,
and that was when he was over the Defender or at VON?
No, when he was over the Defender.
Okay.
And I think he was on VON at the same time.
Right.
And then he moved the paper from 24th in Michigan to 200 South Michigan. Now, he moved down there first.
Oh,
to 200 South Michigan, where they wasn't paying any rent at 24th in Michigan, but they were paying $25,000 a month when he moved it. And so we were asking the question, I mean, even to Thomas Pacou, who allowed y'all to do this? And Pacou was like, well, I'm trying to do this and try. I said, Mr. Pacou, who was the chairman of the newspaper. I said, why would y'all go down somewhere and pay $25,000 a month? Well, come to find out, they were in bed with some Russian dope dealers, and the Russian dope dealers went to what's the name, Genolius's bank, and they were able to pull like $1.6 million out of that so-called loan from Genolius's bank, and we just happened to just run up on it by accident to say, well, man, why did y'all take out a loan? And then the Russian, I think it's Straczynski or something, it was the father and son were locked up at the same time. And then now, as you know, Daley's, one of Daley's good buddies that owns the Millennium Restaurant, defending the building. And Daley's, one of his nephews.
Well, they've converted it into a social place.
And one of Daley's nephews has bought E2 and getting ready to open that up, when you would think that they should have tore that place down. I mean, white people don't go in places where people have lost their lives. And so one of Daley's nephews has also, they're working right now, purchased the E2 building, and they're making it, well, you know, with the new hotel at McCormick Place and all that, that South Loop area there is going to be like the Gold Coast. And if you just go down there, just go from 24th Street to 12th Street. I mean, stuff down there is, but even the things that they're doing in terms of the firehouse, you know, they got that back open. This is all Daley stuff.
Right.
But I don't know how one of his nephews was allowed in the city council meeting is saying he's going to open up E2 where 20-something people died.
Yeah, but we're not considered human beings. And so we got to go back to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And we only got 3/5 of human being status in a compromise to save this concept called the United States of America. But deep in the psyche of white men, especially, we are inferior. We're not human beings. And so you're talking about Black lives lost, mm-hmm. and our lives have never carried the same sacredness or value as a loss of white.
Remember when the Browns chicken thing? They
That's
tore it
right.
down.
That's right. They sure did.
The thing out there, Lane Bryant, they took that away. The David Wacko piece out in Texas, they tore that down. Anytime there's a loss of life, they don't go back in those buildings. But the audacity of one of his nephews to go in there now and say he's going to open up a club,
the World Trade Center.
Oh, well, exactly. I mean, they don't go back in those places. But like you said, for the disrespect of Black life, that he would even have the audacity to open up a place where 20-something young Black people died. And I don't know if you know, but this Friday, Mike, China prepares to hold a forum on the China-Africa Cooperation called FOCAT, which is expected to bring together all 51 African nations. Analysts pointed out that Beijing has become Africa's biggest strategic partner, surpassing the continent's former metropolitan patronage, including America. So China this Friday is having a summit with all 51 country states in Africa, bringing all the presidents in to talk about already the $300 billion that they've spent on the continent, but now to talk about basically taking over the continent.
Yeah, I heard some white people talking on a certain station about food scarcity and how China has gone into the continent of Africa and purchased millions and millions of acres of land. And so one person in this discussion was from the continent, and she was saying she doesn't understand why African leaders wouldn't have enough sense to realize that they should cultivate their own land. And if other nations needed food, be the producer and supplier of the food versus, selling off your land to people who really don't care about you.
Remember Gaddafi? Libya is what? 95% desert.
Mm-hmm.
So what he did took him 20 years to build that
irrigated, water
system, 100 years or so. And his focus was defeat the continent. And then they go in there and bomb him and destroy everything.
Well, Gaddafi,
$25 billion is what he spent.
Well, Gaddafi was about to create an African currency,
right.
depeg from the dollar.
United States of Africa.
Right.
Yep.
And use all of that wealth
That's
to
right.
build infrastructure in Africa.
That's
because
right. That's right.
I don't think there's any steel mills in Africa, even though all the iron ore and all
That's
of the substance to drive the steel industry, a bulk of it comes from the throughout the continent of Africa. There are no plutonium processing plants in Africa, even though there's plutonium coming up out of Africa.
And the 100-year contract that Firestone had.
That's right, for the rubber.
With the rubber,
right?
It's good to 2022. They signed it in 1922,
right?
And so he's had millions and millions of acres of rubber trees that he basically, it was Marcus Garvey who wanted to loan them the money, the $5 million.
Right.
And Firestone found out about it, and he said, "I'll give you the $5 million, but this is what I want in return."
Right.
And that one decision, man, with the rubber, 100-year lease that they had gotten absolutely positively nothing from. And we see the repercussions.
That's what our aldermen do here, in our state reps do here in many cases. I mean, Amazon is coming and they're going to give them bazillions of dollars worth of free tax abatement and tax refunds on, just to build and all kind of incentives. It's like the wealthy whites, corporate whites, they get tax exemption even though they're for profit.
Right.
And poor black people
get
property taxes, bag taxes, water taxes, cigarette tax, which I'm in agreement with. Even the sugar tax, I'm in agreement with the sugar tax on a health principle, but in terms of taxation, it's wrong. You taxing the poor people, but you exonerate the wealthy from paying their fish, just like what Donald Trump just did.
Our tax ratio is higher than Winnetka on the west and south side of Chicago.
Properties over assessed
is higher than Winnetka.
And we got 18 black aldermen.
18 black aldermen.
So I mean, I'm just confused. How can you sit there and you got to go in these nursing homes as an alder person because you need those votes, and you see grandma and them have inadequate health care. They've lost their homes. They had to retreat to a nursing home, many of them. But you will not resist Rahm Emanuel and the white corporate interest that he is advocating for on constantly raising the taxes on poor black people. You may be a good person at home in your family, but when you step out to be a leader, you're totally incompetent. You're totally impotent as a leader. And when you won't fight for poor people over a job, you're afraid to lose your job.
Remember when James Meeks said the 10 years he was in Springfield, he was incompetent. He was impotent. But you can never forgive him for what he took out. I mean, he took William Shaw, and there's no way in any ethnic group around the world that they would allow a number 2 man to be in jeopardy of losing the number 2 slot and going down to number 54. They would have said that man's going to die in office. No Polish, no Italian, no Irish, no Jewish. Nobody would have allowed that to take place in their community but us.
Well, we're easy to be bought off. And so we want to, if white people got a new Benz, we want a new Benz. If they got a new Mercedes or a new Cadillac, we want the new Cadillac. We want what they have. And so it's easy to buy me off if I need a new, I'm an Adidas man. So you bring me a case of Adidas every month, then you can have all the land you want in the neighborhood. I'm not thinking about how dumb that is or how that's hurting the community. All I know is I'm gonna be fresh in Adidas. I'm gonna be able to pad my expenses. I'm gonna be able to get a raise on my salary. We're gonna vote for this raise in the city hall next year because we all took a deal on this thing. So so that's what do to our elected officials. They pull them in the back room and say, I want to do this. I know it's crazy, but just tell me what you want to vote for it. Even though it's crazy, it's going to make you look stupid and ignorant. Tell me what you want, because I need your vote. And our elected officials go for it.
Even in terms of Donnie Trotter stepping down when now there's nobody on the ballot. And so they get the chance to appoint. But why would he wait till now to step down? In terms of okay, why unless they've already decided.
What's the
we
background
already
situation?
know Stanley Moore is his nephew, so we already know what that's. I mean,
same thing with Chuy Garcia
exactly.
and the congressman.
Oh yeah,
you know,
what's his name? Right,
they
right.
took Chuy out, in my opinion, so he wouldn't be a threat to Rahm. There was a deal cut that to isolate black people and Hispanic votes. So, Brother Harold, we have run out of time,
yes, sir.
and we're gonna have to have you back real soon,
yes,
so
sir.
you can continue to inform our listening audience. Everybody tune in to WBGX tomorrow from 2 to 4 p.m. 1570 on the AM dial, and check out Brother Harold Davis on the Butt Naked Truth. God willing, we'll see you next week with our regular host, Brother Gregory Sain, signing off for the New Black Leadership Coalition on IntellectualRadio.com.